What fighting game concept was the hardest for you to grasp? In fighting games, we have so many different concepts. You have Oki Oki Zima, you have 50/50s, you have mix ups, you have, all these other things that, people say. Coming into fighting games, it was so hard when you listen to commentary. It was like you might as well be like studying Hebrew or something. It was just like every 3 words y'all using this term that I'm just like, what? Like he did what? And then you just have to kind of like guess what they're talking about. But you know, sometimes it was really really hard. So what concept was what concept was it for you guys that was just like mad difficult to pick up on? So starting with you, Mr. Gaming Lift. If you're able to contain yourself, we'll start
For
with you on
me,
this topic.
for me, 100%, it was meaties. Like, I didn't know for the longest. They were like, "Oh, that was meaty." I'm like, "Come on now, what does this mean? It's meaty." Like, I couldn't even like guesstimate like what that meant. Like, oh, it's meaty. I don't know. Like, is it like hamburger helper meaty? Like I don't know. For the longest, I was like, I don't know. And I would try to analyze every time a situation would come up where they would use a term meaty and when they were commentating, I'm like, I still don't get it. And I understood and I'm like, oh, that's what meaty is. Until like I started playing and like actually like looking into it more and starting to use stuff myself. I'm like, oh, this is what meaty is. I guess this word makes sense for it. I still don't know how. I don't know. It's like the word still doesn't make sense because meaty is from my understanding pretty much you do a move and you try to have it hit at the last frame, the very last frame, so it's even more plus than it normally is. And meaty, usually if you hit like something meaty, that means you can attack, you can combo into it when you normally couldn't. So like Fame, his example of meaty is like his I think his jab stand light kick into stand fierce. And the light kick hit so meaty, he's so far away and hit at the last front. You see what I'm saying? It don't even sound right. It's like, and that's what they were like, man, they hit so meaty. I'm like, what? It hit me, right? Like he felt it in his
So
stomach, like
meaty.
punched him in the chest, like. And I was like, oh, it just he does the stand jab, stand light kick. Then he does the stand fierce, which normally doesn't combo after a light kick, but the fact that he's so far away, the last frame is what hit. He's technically plus, so now he can combo when he what he normally couldn't combo. So it's like, oh, that it makes sense now that I understand it. But it's like when you would hear people like say the terms and commentators, like, what does this mean? Like, I think that was for me probably one of the hardest, even beyond like frame data and what was plus. Like, what's plus and negative? That kind of makes sense. Oh, it's plus, so it has to be an excess of something. Oh, if it's negative, oh, he must something must be off here, right? But like when it came to meaty, I was like, what? Oh man, that was mad meaty, man. Like, what? What is that? Can you please
Sound like
explain to
you
me, bro?
sponsoring a beef jerky.
That's what I'm saying. Like and it's the crazy thing. I always thought of hamburger helper every time they say this. I'm like, I don't know why I'm thinking of hamburger helper when they say this. Like, oh man, y'all see that jab was crazy meaty, man. Oh, they hit meaty. Like, I'm just like, I'm thinking of hamburger helper for some reason. Like, I don't know, like beef stroganoff or something. It's like, but I understand it now pretty much. So it's like, but the term is always, even when I understood, it's like this term does not quite match. I don't. Maybe use something like I don't know. I don't even know. I would love to know where that term came from. Like, can somebody please give me the origin of meaty? Like when somebody first said, okay, for this move, it's technically plus. It's plus. So who was the first person that said meaty? Can somebody give me that answer, please? Twitter or something. Can somebody give me the origin of the term meaty? That's all I need, please. Because I was lost as all get out for a long time about the term meaty.
Okay, so the term for me that gave me the most issues, And still, even now, sometimes when I think about it, I'm just like, maybe I think I know what I'm talking about. I think I know what it is neutral. Like the whole concept of neutral, it always seemed like, I mean, even now it seems like to me a nebulous term. Now I know some of you are like, they're like, oh, amazing, you're a freaking idiot. And I'm like, yeah, you might be right. But like the thing is, like the whole concept of neutral was always to me, I'm like, what do you mean? They'd be like, somebody would come up to me and be like, oh, Eve, you need to work on your neutral. What does that mean? Oh, you got to work on like opening people up. Okay, so is that it? Well, no. Well, what else is there? You gotta, whiff punish and stuff like that, and this, that, and the third. I'm like, okay. And then like I work on that, and it's like, yo, man, you need to work on your neutral. Well, what else do I gotta do? And it's like it's like this umbrella term for all this stuff that you gotta do. And I'm kind of like, it's telling, because like before, like I really started getting into the FGC, and I mean really like learning what that meant. Somebody would say, hey, you got to work on your neutral. And it's like, okay, I guess maybe moving around a little bit more, playing footsies, stuff like that. But it's like neutral is so much more than that, like I said, it's a nebulous term. You can't just tell somebody you got to work on neutral. You know what I mean? Like saying, oh yeah, you got to work on your neutral. Oh man, let me go work on my neutral. And then you're sitting in what's called in practice mode thinking, oh, I'm working on my neutral. And then like you're not whiff punishing anything. You're not learning how to like block properly or anything like that. You're not, spacing, which is an important part of neutral. Like all that stuff is part of neutral. It's you know what I mean? It's like saying, oh, you got to go exercise. You know what I mean? Like you got to go exercise. Okay, fine. But what part of my body do I need to exercise in order to get into shape? There are just so many different parts to your body that you got your core, your leg muscles, even in your legs. You can't even just say, hey, you need to work on your legs. Okay, well, what I need to work on, you got your glutes, your thighs, your calves, and stuff like, there's different parts to your leg. What do I got to work on? So I don't know, man. When people would say like you got to work on neutral, it was such a nebulous term that it never made 100% sense to me, and I always felt like, man, there's something I'm missing here. It's like, whoa, man, you got to open people up. What does that mean? Do I got to do more lows? Do I got to do more throws? Do I got to do crouch grabs? Do I got to do overheads? And that's I just want to take a sidebar real quick. Why is it that Ed doesn't have any overheads in Street Fighter V? Why does that make sense? Who thought that was a good idea? Just saying. Anyway, like yeah, man, I think like the concept I had the most problem with was neutral, because it was always explained piecemeal to me. Like it was never explained all at once. I kind of had to acquire the concepts one by one that make up neutral, instead of the whole thing where it's like you need to do this and this and this and this, and then it's like, okay, I'm working on one part but I'm neglecting another part. And then it took a while to actually be able to work on the whole thing as a whole. And I'm like, okay, all of these concepts are what make up neutral. But until then, I was just like working on one thing and neglecting a whole bunch of other things. So I was just spinning my wheels for the most part. So I'm kind of glad, that now I have a 60% understanding of what neutral is, I think. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, so I'm open and honest about my limited knowledge of fighting game terminology. Like when we were younger, nobody cared. It was just, are you good? Or are you bad? Can you like, are you naturally good? You naturally bad? Are you willing to put in the work to figure out some stuff? Whatever. Got to college, Devin smacked me in the mouth, so I cried and retired. And college and stuff. So you just you have to choose. Was it your career or Devin making you cry every day? So I chose to do college. So it wasn't until I got out of college that I was like, you know what? Let me start taking this fighting game stuff serious. Let me get into the scene. And then once I got into the scene, I got more into the content creation side. So for me, it's more so like hearing, people talk about the terminology and stuff like that and trying to gauge what it is that they're saying based off, commentary and stuff like overheads, and things like that. Like that was kind of easy to understand, but like I had three things like like finding out what was plus or negative on block for a while. Like people just saying like that's plus on block, and I'm like, what? you know, and it's like, yeah, that's negative on block, and you know that, or that's plus, that's negative. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't see plus or minuses hopping up on the screen every time somebody gets hit. Like, so I have no idea what y'all are talking about, but basically they're talking about, you know, the frames, like your recovery and things like that. Um, when you do an attack. So one thing that kind of like helped me realize it was like a fireball. If you throw a fireball and somebody jumps over it, you have a lot of frames that you have to recover from. Or like if somebody does a move and it's on block, if it's negative, they can punish you after after the hit. But if it's plus, you're not, you know, they have enough time to, you know, keep attacking you because you're the one who's in a negative situation. Then Oki, I said this last time. Oki was one that I was just like, I don't know what y'all talking about, because I think Devin explained this to me, and if I'm right or wrong, Devin, let me know. But Oki is basically like the options that you have once you knock somebody to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when they were saying like, okay, setting up for the Oki, the dude's on the ground and like, you know, like the other person's waiting. So it's like it's basically everything's at a standstill, and it's like we're at the Oki and it's like, but nothing's happening. What are you talking about? Like nobody's doing nothing. So like I just couldn't grasp like what they were talking about with Oki until, you know, Devin broke it down for me. And then another thing that was kind of like strange to me, when you'd hear like people talking about a game and they'd be like, hey man, you know, after a set, somebody'd be like, hey man, can you explain to me this and this and this and this? And they'd start saying stuff like, oh yeah, when you do so and so's down forward, left, right, MP, up, down, QR. And it's just like, what are you saying? And he's just breaking down like the combo, like, you know, the inputs for the combo, like when you do they down forward, you know, heavy, sweep, MK, whatever. It was just like, what are y'all? They down forward 6. I'm like, what? Like, you know, like I just didn't get it. Period. I'm like, y'all in here speaking like literally computer code. Like I just don't know what y'all talking about. So
Basically.
yeah, so for a while it was just like having to real when I started watching like people actually teach you combos, like, you know, kind of how like Lord Knight does. That's when I started realizing, I was like, oh, they're explaining a combo. Like they're explaining the inputs to the combo, like especially in Tekken, because people, I think in Tekken people break down their combos like with numbers, like 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so it was just like, I don't know, hey, like I don't, you know, I see shapes on the controller, so I don't know what y'all talking about. So, you know, that was another thing that was really hard for me. And even still, there's so many other things like, you know, within the FGC that I, you know, from not being so much of a player nowadays, it's kind of like, man, this is really, really difficult to like grasp what y'all are trying to say. And then it's just kind of like people, it's just this thing of people making you feel like you're dumb because you don't know this stuff. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, how am I supposed to know down forward 3, 4, 4 be back? And I'm and I'm just supposed to know what you saying.